time to go. So super, super happy to see you all here. For those who arrived today, the overflow room, I swear, is really, really lovely. So don't take it bad. Then we'll all get together for a really, wow, these lights are different than usual. Okay, that we'll get together all for the reception, so it's going to be lovely. So thank you for being here to Salon, MoMA R&D Salon number 48. Yeah, I know, we keep on advancing with numbers. It's pretty amazing. Thank you, thank you, thank you. That's nice, yeah. Really, really happy to see you all. No More Likes is the name of the salon, and I just remembered that I don't have the instrument of power, which is the clicker, so here we are. So let's get into it right away. We hear everywhere that the internet, this is not working. Uh-oh, clicker not working. In the meantime, I'll just do my thing, but we'll need another one, please. So we hear everywhere that the internet is getting worse and worse and worse. And we're about to embark, well, we're already in the middle of an electoral campaign, so we're getting message and bombardments from everywhere. And also there are many people that are just doing away with all kind of online engagement. So, you know, let's see. Nothing new, huh? Clicker. Ah, what's happened now? It's gone all completely. Oh, okay, all right, now it's working, thank you. So we hear that everything is happening at the same time and the internet is getting worse and worse. So Chen Sang-yuan, Pokemon Go grandpa, is kind of a metaphor for our situation right now. Who are we? Where are we going? And how are we going to get there? And can we see through the whole white noise and white vision of all these different screens? So this was a man who in 2018, therefore several years ago at age 74, was playing Pokemon Go on 64 phones at the same time. So really a devotee of the game. And in a way, it helps us think about our predicament, even though 6 years in internet years are so many. And of course, we hear that the internet is negative and getting worse by the day. I probably am one of the last few people that have some hope in it, but we know that it is cause for many teen girls and individuals for being bullied and having a low sense of themselves, AI-generated garbage, the enshittification of TikTok, the age of algorithmic anxiety, and also the bills against TikTok. So everything is talking about a toxic internet that we better detoxify from as soon as possible. And I would like to go back to the beginning of it all, even though you've heard it so many times. It's always nice to have this primer about how things used to be and how they are today. Web 1. We're talking about this LSD popping and weed smoking computer and hippies in California in the 1960s that were hoping that in a utopia that was really protected by this machine. All Watched Over by Machines of Loving Grace is a poem that Richard Brautigan wrote in 1969, actually 1968. And we know, of course, of the Whole Earth catalog, and we're familiar with the operating manual for Spaceship Earth by Bucky Fuller. So it was this dream of getting to a new kind of democracy that would be fueled by the internet, by a new order that was based on the feedback of information. So we also see in 1995, Kenichi Omai, when the internet was actually happening, dreaming about the end of the nation state. So the political impact of an internet that would do away with previous model and create a new global democracy, a loving democracy watched over by loving and graceful machines. We know what happened, Web 2.0. Web 2.0 happened, and you know, it's people say that it was at the turn of the millennium. I mean, the first time the term was used was 1999, but it's after the 2K turning point that it actually became really understood. And it was a more templated internet. So all of a sudden, you know, in Web 1, everybody was trying their own website, and there were such wonderful horrors, right? It was really tacky and fabulous because everybody was kind of drunk with the power of the new technology. And instead, Web 2.0, templates, people using templates, and also initial Tumblrs and initial social media to kind of really build on content. So it was about content. That was the focus. And there was at the beginning a lot of hashtag activism, more social media activism. But then in the end, slowly but surely, the internet became much more commodified. And this kind of oligopoly platforms took over and transformed really the way we use the internet. And then we get to Web 3. You know, and I'm proceeding very fast, but everybody thinks that this is Web 3. Now, this is a little reductive. There's a lot of infantile, childlike and childish mood in Web 3, but we like to think about it more like this, and this is actually an image that we used for a salon that we did, Salon 40, which was about the third web. It's a beautiful work by Fujiko Nakaya, this fog environment. The idea that individuals will be able to actually connect with each other based on blockchain technology, bypassing the platforms of yesteryear, and actually create a more equitable and decentralized system that empowers user with the ownership of their online data. So the values are really embracing digital assets, the idea of collective governance, a community construction, patrons and fans as co-creators, and decentralized brand identities. It's not that dissimilar from the dream of Web 1. So we've been moving forward as much as possible to kind of get back to the innocence that we have lost in these decades. And you know, there are many layers in between. We really love the Dark Forest Anthology of the Internet, which is a classic book that now has just been republished with new essays. But if you look, for instance, at that illustration by Maggie Appleton, I really love it because it talks about, you know, there's the clear web, which is the web that most of us use, and then there's the dark web, which is the internet undergrowth of decomposing morals. So that's where assassination orders happen and where all of the most nefarious aspects of the internet happen, unbeknownst to us, because we don't know how to get there. And then, of course, there's the cozy web, which is the web where many of us live today, which is about just like groups of interest that communicate with each other using platforms that are not open to everybody. That's also where Discord is, for instance, or paid newsletters like Substack or group messaging. So it's cozy because you tend to be with your like-minded friends. And then we have the dark forest up on top, which is almost in the clear web. It's in the clear web, but it's inhabited by data scavengers and ad people. So it's where we're all transparent and all available to everyone, and people are kind of feeding and foraging on us. So I love these metaphors that are even graphic because they really talk about our predicament of today. And they also talk about the fact that the key is indexing an address, whether we can be found or not. It's quite fascinating from that viewpoint. But there's also a big problem happening right now that the dream of a global internet is breaking down because of geopolitical wars. We know very well the ban on TikTok that is now a bill about to go to Senate in the United States, and it's already happened that TikTok has been banned in Australia, Denmark, France, Indonesia, Netherlands, and New Zealand. Also, there is the question of Line. Line is very much used in Japan and in South Korea, and the company belongs to South Korea and Japan, but apparently there was a breach of data in South Korea, and the Japanese are outraged, and they're trying to force South Korea to sell their shares of the company. So, you know, you can feel the geopolitics that are running against this dream of communication, global communication everywhere. And, you know, we know very well that also several American, US media are being banned all over the world as a form of reprisal. So it's not anymore the way we were dreaming. Actually, it's going almost in the opposite direction. And at the same time, there's also a lot of discontent with technology. There are some really funny situations, like, you know, on the one hand, we have the Apple Vision Pro that has officially arrived, And it's very funny, but that image reminds me a lot of the Google Glass. Remember, remember how we used to call them? And then on the right-hand side, there is this guy that seriously is talking about using a Roman wax tablet in his real life. So there are kind of the two extremes. I understand sometimes you need to kind of like get off things, but that seems a little extreme. And now we have even created a secondary industry that is all about taking us away from social media. This idea of the cookie jar in which you put your smartphone and it opens only at certain times, so you can get only that much. It reminds me a little bit of the early 2000s, where people were really concerned about whether we would be able to detach ourselves from media and have a family life or a real life. So a whole industry is getting us addicted to the technologies that are about not being addicted to the previous technologies. So frankly, do they all think that we're so stupid? I think we're not, and I think it's time we let them know. This is also a video by Sammy, a student that had like millions and millions and millions of viewings, where they were trying to let everybody know that the answer is the flip phone. I know that you know about the flip phone craze, and the flip phone was perfect because when you're out with your friends at night, you can only communicate with the friends that you really like. You cannot text while you're drunk because it's too complicated to text. So all these different reasons why the flip phone is the answer. And this video was viewed by millions of people, and you can see from the comments that everybody was like, oh yeah, let's go and try it out. And it gave a whole start to a new industry of so-called dumb phones, from the punked phone to that collaboration at the bottom between Heineken and Bodega. That's a streetwear company in Boston. That's called the boring phone, and which reminds me of one of the biggest gifts that Elon Musk has given the world, which is the best name for his company, the Boring Company. Anyway, but I digress. So you see how everything is crazy, but we wonder, Christina and I wonder, is it really about a new departure from the technology that we have today, or is it nostalgia? Is it nostalgia for this, albeit great time, of people using their flip phones? Is it aesthetics, is it style, or is it substance? And actually, Christina did not insert here Jack Bauer and Zoolander. They were amongst the biggest users, actually, of flip phones. But you can see how this moment could be attractive. And we're getting to actually the excess of primitive technology. There's this guy here that has, oh, the laser doesn't work. Oh, so anyway, this guy over there on TikTok who has millions of followers, people tell him what they want to see him make with his own hands for them, and then he does all these like requests. Or there is this primitive technology, 10.9 million subscribers YouTube feed that is all about technology that is non-electrical and certainly non-digital. And then there are these great memes with a cottagecore Kim Kardashian in an old photo shoot. And they're all about how crazy it is when you don't use technology, like me when I forget to take my phone to the bathroom, or me when I arrive at somebody's house without texting here, and instead I knock on the door. So all of these like jokes about people and their manias about technology are like feeding on each other. So one reads everything without purpose, without any order. One does not appreciate anything and devours everything. Nothing is understood properly, and everything is given only a cursory reading and then forgotten right away, which is, however, quite good for most of what was read. Now, you would think that this was written yesterday, and instead it was written in 1794 by Johann Gottfried Hoch. So you can see something is repeated in history, right? There is a sort of like how can I say, numb vote of confidence with new technology that repeats itself. And, let's go back to the Luddites. So much has been said about neo-Luddites and about the fact that the only way forward is to reject technology, but that's not what the Luddites were about. The Luddites were textile workers that were trying to make sure that the new technologies, especially the mechanical loom, would not destroy their source of income and their lives. But they were not against the mechanical loom. Here is the machine. They were against the use that corporations would make of that technology. they were against their lack of control of the technology. It's also the moment of Marx starting to talk about workers having control of their own destiny and of their means of production. So it's not being against technology. It's about technology in the hands of the people, and it's about people's rights. So it's important to remember this so as to understand that there's a depth also to this phenomenon. This leads us to the Promethean Gap, to the myth of Prometheus that went up to Mount Olympus to steal fire from the gods, found himself with this new amazing technology that gave humans so much power, but that in the end was also destructive and difficult, impossible to control. This is the work of Gunther Anders, who introduced this idea in the 1950s. To him, it was almost like a response, a philosophical response to the atomic bomb. When humans get to the point that they create a technology that they don't even understand, that they cannot control, that takes over and escapes from them. And of course, you can think about this kind of Promethean gap in very benign terms. At some point, we were saying that the keys of the BlackBerry were getting too small for the fingers of humans. But then, taken to its extreme today, beyond the atomic bomb, is the idea of the singularity of machines really taking over, of us not being able to follow progress anymore while it escapes from us. So it's about trying to understand whether there's something innately wrong with technology that we need to deal with. As you know, we always ask for video contributions from people that cannot be here. And we asked Lauren Michelle Jackson at Northwestern University to actually answer this question: how does viral content embody Black cultural production and circulation? So Lauren wrote a beautiful piece that is in our reading list. It's called The Blackness of Meme Movement, that is widely recognized. So in that piece, she talks about memes, how they mutate and twist and split and circle back on themselves so as to embody the already established trends of Black cultural production and circulation. In other words, she says that memes not only contain components of Black language, they gravitate towards a Black way of speaking. So she's really thoughtful and very widely cited. And she sent us this email, which we think is an amazingly important contribution to our discourse. She said that the current landscape, as it relates to AI manipulation, alongside the targeting of professors with intellectual investments in race, have me feeling rather protective of my image of late. So she basically said, I cannot serve you a crisp image of myself in video because it would be about making myself vulnerable to deepfakes and to the use of AI. Interesting, right? Because Christina and I were bowled over by this response. We thought this is where we're at, and this is where people that are really sensitive and close to the issues find themselves. So deepfakes are a problem. Truth is a problem. We've had also Salon about it. And we need to talk about it. We need to get ourselves really ready for what's to come. And tonight, to speak about this, we have 5 great speakers. So we're going to start with Stefan Andriopoulos, who's professor of German and co-founder of the Center for Comparative Media at Columbia University. Then we will have Tega Brain, who's an Australian-born artist and environmental engineer. And Logan Lane, who is the founder of the Brooklyn's Luddite Club, a group of teenagers who gave up their smartphones. I mean, that was about 2 years ago, so we'll hear from them where they are now. And then Kevin Munger, who's assistant professor of political science and social data analytics at Penn State. And last but not least, Nimei Ndolo, who's a TikToker, artist, comedian, and coder. And then we'll have videos from these other great individuals. So I would like to call, first of all, the video from Johanna Drucker, and then we will have Stefan speaking to us. So Johanna's videos, please.
The global hegemony of the alphabet is apparent in the role that it plays in internationally networked communications. Though machine language is binary, ones and zeros, Arabic numerals and the mysterious Indian zero, the layer that's built on top of that is entirely alphanumeric. So PHP, transfer protocols, programming languages, everything that's executable is written in alphanumeric code. The original programming languages were written in English, C, C++, Pascal, Python, and this was to ensure interoperability. But as we know, standards are a form of power. The alphabet that I'm referencing when I speak of alphanumeric notation is what was invented in the ancient Near East around 1800, 1700 BCE. Now, these Semitic-speaking peoples did not invent writing. Writing already existed in cuneiform scripts and in hieroglyphics, and they had been around for about 1,000 years, give or take. What was a unique contribution, however, was the analysis of language into a finite set of sounds that could be efficiently represented by a small and stable set of signs. It's these signs, the Proto-Canaanite taproot of the alphabet, that spread, get modified, adopted, and transformed into different script forms: Arabic, Cyrillic, the Roman alphabet, Greek alphabet, all the alphabets of the Indian subcontinent, and continue to be used today. Aside from alphabetic scripts, the only writing systems in use are character-based, Chinese and Japanese, and the unique contribution of Hangul to Korean. So what's astonishing is that these signs, created almost 4,000 years ago, continue to play such a powerful role in contemporary life.
Thank you for having me. So I will start right away. So I'm talking about rumors and misinformation in a historical perspective. The image was striking. A sexualized fusion of donkey, woman, devil, and bird. The monster stood next to a river with a Pope's flag on a castle in the background. It was a woodcut on the first page of a pamphlet published in 1523 in Germany. The authors were no less than the Protestant reformers, Dr. Martin Luther and Philip Melanchthon. Explaining the monstrous creature on the front page, Melanchthon called it the Pope Ass. The theologian took up a rumor about a monster allegedly left behind by a flood in Rome, and he declared it a sign sent by God and clear proof for the perverse monstrosity of the Pope. The pamphlet gained wide circulation before going through numerous reprints. And while it may seem far-fetched, the veracity of the image and its Protestant interpretation were accepted by many readers and illiterate viewers. Even a Latin treatise on monsters published 50 years later took the reality of the monster for granted. But there was one reversal. According to its Catholic author, the hideous form signified not the Pope, but rather the twisted appearance of Luther's heretical teachings. Nowadays, when we speak of Gutenberg's invention of movable type, we mostly refer to its more reputable side. And to be sure, the new technology did foster the exchange of scholarly ideas and the scientific revolution. But similar to the proliferation of rumors and falsehood on social media platforms, the printing press also facilitated the circulation of fake news and sensationalist pamphlets. Just like today, this misinformation was often taken to be true. Gutenberg's invention thereby enabled a multiplication of monsters. In addition to the broadcasting of the Pope Ass, there was also the monster of Ravenna with a single horn, two bat-like wings, and a complicated lower body. Equally popular was the monk calf, explained by Luther himself in the same pamphlet as Melanchthon's take on the Pope Ass. And there were other monstrosities pictured and interpreted in a search of pamphlets that found wide belief because of their newfound wide circulation. The parallels to our present day are striking. While hardly anyone may believe in monk calves, more than a third of Americans believe in the big lie that the 2020 election was stolen. In a similar vein, anti-vaccine narratives and conspiracy theories have led their believers to see vaccines as dangerous or even as government-controlled implants. In addition to taking note of the obvious similarities, we also need to ask, how is it possible that so many people lend credence to these rumors? And how can we counter falsehoods that seem immune to rational refutation. At least part of the answer lies with the fact that across different historical periods, the introduction of new media technologies has increased the circulation of rumors and misinformation. And wide circulation and repetition create belief. Case in point, the 1523 pamphlet about the Pope ass arose from a self-amplifying feedback loop across various media. The rumor of the Roman monster first spread via hearsay and handwritten letters. Then its image moved via an engraving and a woodcut into the medium of print. The transition from one medium to another one increased the credibility of the story. In addition, the transition also engendered more hearsay and further reprints. Today, the rise and spread of Pizzagate, QAnon, and the Big Lie follow a similar pattern of going viral. The main difference is that our feedback loops are faster, and our technologies include cell phones, the internet, and cable TV. It is also clear that rumors are misleading, and they are frequently weaponized and turned into deliberate disinformation and propaganda. But viral rumors are almost never entirely false. Instead, they give voice to collective fears and desires by blending facts with fabrications. Take QAnon, a strange hybrid of rumor, conspiracy theory, and cult. There is a complete lack of evidence for QAnon's claims of a deep state conspiracy of satanic pedophiles who battle against a messiah figure named Donald Trump. But it is well documented that powerful groups, the Catholic Church, national athletic organizations, have covered up systematic sexual abuse of minors. Q's false claims thus find a receptive audience because they resonate with real scandals and a deep distrust of our status quo. Turning to a different example, we can also observe this mixing of real concerns with extreme fabrications in Paris in May 1750. There, a rumor led to the killing of several police officers by an outraged mob. The dark story that was going around alleged that King Louis XV was suffering from leprosy and trying to cure himself by taking baths in the blood of children. This was a rumor of literal blood baths with clear echoes of the anti-Semitic blood libel. The narrative was widely believed, however, because of something real. In the months before the riot, the police had been arbitrarily arresting unaccompanied children off the streets of Paris. Because rumors gain credence from a self-amplifying feedback loop, their circulation is rarely ended by rational refutation. Instead, a rebuttal may even be counterproductive, as it inadvertently repeats and spreads the allegation that it disproves. But history shows that rumors can be engaged, modified, and redirected through counter-narratives. Such counter-narratives are stories that gain wide circulation for themselves and thereby eclipse misinformation. One example for this dynamic can be found in the mid-19th century. In 1843, the invention of the rotary printing press enabled an explosive growth of pamphlets and of cheap newspapers with often questionable news. Just as in the early modern period of Gutenberg, newly emerging modes of circulation thus served a double function. They were an agent of enlightenment and at the same time a medium for the amplification of rumors and misinformation. One text that theorized and deployed this double-edged power of circulation is Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels' Communist Manifesto, which was published 5 years after the invention of the rotary printing press. In addition to highlighting the revolutionary change brought about by a capitalist world market, Marx and Engels focus on new media technologies such as steamships, railways, and electrical telegraphs. They praise this growing means of communication as a... Okay, yes. As abolishing local and national boundaries and as fostering the rise of a world literature. The Communist Manifesto thereby celebrates technological innovation for bringing about political progress, but this optimistic stance ignores the wide range of possible outcomes, positive or negative, that marks the introduction of new technologies. At the same time, Marx and Engels also take note of the dark side of print media. they explicitly attack most of the socialist texts circulating in 1848 as belonging to a domain of foul and unnerving literature. This phrase could as well describe the monster pamphlets from Gutenberg's era, but in the context of the 1840s, it serves as a description of political misinformation. In addition to a number of second-rate texts that offered a hollow version of socialism, there were also rumors about the dangers of a communist takeover. And already in the first sentence, the manifesto responds to the circulation of these stories by famously pronouncing, "A specter is going around in Europe, the specter of communism." However, in order to counter the fairy tales of the specter of communism, Marx and Engels do not merely rebut false claims, they tell their own rousing story about the universal liberation from the chains of capitalist exploitation that will be brought about by the world market. Today, the presumed certainty of this outcome rightfully elicits skepticism, but what remains true is that fact checks that refute false claims they refute will not end the circulation of a rumor. The opening of the manifesto, by contrast, draws on the circulation of these horror stories to propel the dissemination of their own narrative. Our current situation is shaped by different technologies. That means instead of pamphlets or woodcuts, we need counter-narratives or counter-videos that I hope all the other panelists can tell us about, that can offer hope and that can thrive on social media platforms such as TikTok, YouTube, or Facebook. However, we can gain a crucial insight from the humble pamphlet published in 1848. By widely disseminating an electrifying counter-narrative, one can harness the power of circulation to supersede and eclipse the proliferation of disinformation. Thank you.
That's so excellent. Thank you. And now we have a video by Ranjot Singh Dhaliwal.
Picture this. It is 2024. Someone asks you, what is your address? You reply with your apartment number, a street name, a city name, and a zip code. Now, picture the exact same question being asked 1,000 years ago. There are no street names, no house numbers, and no zip codes. How are you addressed in this case? Addresses are something we take for granted now, but humans have lived for thousands of years without numbered locations. Searching or finding someone was never an easy task, but never was the need to have everyone be addressable felt. The change can be understood by looking at the year 1770 in Vienna, when some houses, the ones with men living inside them, were numbered so as to prevent subjects from escaping conscription. Exact addressing emerged to help the bureaucratic and military apparatuses of the modern state. And since then, we have had to be addressable. It is no longer the king that needs to be able to find us. It is our job now to make sure that we are findable. If you don't believe me, try not having an address on your identity card. If we return to the question, what is your address today, and only state our home address, we will be missing something. Today, our email addresses, IP addresses, and MAC addresses are as much, if not more important, should we need to be located. Because locating us in 2024 means locating our computational devices and smartphones. This addressability is historically and operationally a foundational condition of computation at large. Think memory addresses or file addresses, think streams of data, bus systems. There's a reason these vocabularies sound very similar. Computation can be understood as a play of space, where everything needs to be findable and thus eventually found. What happens when all objects, think Internet of Things or ubiquitous computing, and the whole world starts to come under the fantasy of perfect addressability? What happens when addresses, which historically have been divine or royal or governmental, become corporate? A user, after all, does not have the same rights as a subject or a citizen. If Vienna in 1770 did not number the houses where women resided, because they could not be conscripted and so were not necessary, who is being left out of the logic today? And is being unaddressable a good thing or bad? I'm not sure, but I do think that the pathway to an answer will lie through and not around this struggle with the system of addressability. Perhaps there is no becoming ungovernable or corporately troublesome without becoming selectively unaddressable.
Our next speaker, yes, Turanjot. Our next speaker is Tega Brain.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Paola and Christina, for organising this today. I remember when the internet felt alive with possibility, with new forms of community and connection that I'd not really experienced before. But as timelines became algorithmic and they filled up with digital ads that were weirdly insightful to the point of creepy, online life started to become and feel very different. In 2019, I was invited to develop a project in collaboration with a public library in Brooklyn. And this was the year that followed the Cambridge Analytica scandal. You probably recall Cambridge Analytica. It was a notorious data firm that had shadily acquired Facebook data to provide highly manipulative, micro-targeted political advertising. And this scandal really brought home the ways that user data, likes, clicks, scrolls, watch times, enabled content to be targeted at really specific groups of people. I wanted to know what it would look like to put these tools and techniques into the hands of some people who don't usually find themselves in a position, my slides are moving on, to manipulate the media. Why should only people like Steve Bannon get to influence others with targeted content? And so I was assigned to work with Bushwick Public Library, and Bushwick Analytica was born. So through a series of workshops with 10-year-old children, I invited them to harness the power of data-driven advertising to develop and promote their own targeted and highly manipulative media campaigns. After all, the best way to understand how companies like Google and Facebook work is to post an ad on their platform. So we looked at the Google Ads platform and the categories used to target select groups: age, home address, search terms, things people had previously Googled, interests, habits, and so on. And these middle schoolers then developed their own ad campaigns, which we launched on the Google Ad platform. And so the results look something like this. This was a utopian campaign by Ivona, who wanted to target young people with messaging around improving our political system. She asked for a better president, an honest country, no lying, no shouting at people, and no shooting. Others perhaps were more personally motivated. Josiah encouraged males of his parents' age, who also had interest in technology, to play Fortnite, but not for too long. Some were targeting broad groups. Here, Adam honed in on parents and teachers with a message to cancel school on Mondays. And finally, my favourite, by Michael, was highly specific. He wanted to target people who were his parents 1 mile around his house with this message that I should have a dog. Get your kids a dog. According to Google's metrics, these campaigns achieved several hundreds of impressions each and hundreds of click-throughs. But sadly, I don't know if any of the children actually achieved their goals. But what is an impression? An impression is the fundamental unit of attention. It's defined as when more than 50% of the pixels of an ad occupy the viewable space of a browser for one continuous second after the page is loaded. As author Tim Huang writes in his book on digital ad systems, impressions standardize attention so that it can be commodified. So through this process, the business model of the internet comes into full view, and it allows us to consider how it's profoundly shaping our understanding of the world. Automated engagement data influences the stories we tell and don't tell. It influences newsroom decisions because it determines the value of specific articles and coverage. And at a time when we're facing deeply existential threats like that of the climate crisis, the stories we see or don't see and the means by which they are delivered have atmospheric effects. And so these are all the New York Times headlines from 2020, a year of horrific climate disasters around the world, and yet climate environment is barely mentioned. How is this ad-driven model of the internet, where content is optimized, shaping the response to the climate crisis? This is a question that I've been very interested in over the past few years. And in a broadcast media landscape where algorithms dominate with little human oversight, how might it be possible to intervene? And so what you see on screen is a collaborative work made with Sam Levine, who's here in the audience. And it's an algorithmic performance carried out by a botnet, and it posits that algorithmic media platforms could also be seen as geoengineering technologies. Of course, bots are programs that simulate human interactions with online platforms. They can do things like generate text, images, post to social media platforms, click on content, listen for keywords, repost or repeat. And every day, the synthetic media botnet scrapes the web for articles reporting on climate change, and then it sends its bots to these articles and clicks on all the ads that are running alongside each story. Each bot is animated with a quivering hand and a recorded voice. And with every synthetic click, a small payment is made from advertiser to news outlet, artificially inflating the value of that reporting. So we ran the project for 2 weeks. Our bots visited 2.4 million articles and clicked on over 6.7 million ads. In the ad industry, this is called click fraud or inauthentic behaviour. But I ask you to consider, what is an authentic click?
Scroll. Click.
Click.
We also made this in the context of the pandemic, so it was first shown as a Zoom performance.
Scroll. Click. Scroll. Click.
Click.
Scroll.
Scroll.
Click.
Click.
Scroll. Click.
Scroll.
Scroll. Click.
Scroll. Click.
Scroll.
Okay, I'll keep going. The fossil fuel industry and lobbyists have long known that those who control the media cycle have an outsized influence on the climate cycle. And there's an evolving catalogue of media manipulation strategies that leverage the logics of online platforms to amplify misinformation in ways that deflect blame from the fossil fuel industry or benefit them in some way. And so this is a genuine challenge in a media ecosystem that remains sympathetic to these voices. Media becomes ecology. But in Synthetic Messenger, we were less interested in having our bots interact with human users and instead aimed to develop one automated system to skew the economic operation of another. It's bots talking to bots all the way down. And we're living at a moment when the urgent need for carbon management is colliding with the dominance of big tech in its current monopolistic and relatively unregulated form. To meet the challenge of reaching net zero, or better still, actual zero, we're seeing carbon markets, we're seeing planetary computers, we're seeing environmental monitoring platforms and digital carbon registries. What are the lessons we've learned from the rise in online platforms? Are we going to use these same technologies to commodify carbon flows, just like we've used them to commodify something as abstract as attention? And so I want to propose that we shouldn't be so willing to hand over this crucial transition to big tech without a radical reconfiguration of who owns these systems and the business models that underlie them. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so inauthentic behavior could be the new civil disobedience, right? And now a video by Brian Merchant.
Understanding that the Luddites had very real grievances and were quite a powerful organizing force, we can recontextualize what Luddism might mean today in an age where we've seen generative AI and automated systems take on renewed centrality and significance in the tech space and beyond, when companies are pushing for more and more automation. They're selling generative AI as a tool that can replace creative labor. Well, artists, writers, illustrators, copywriters, creative laborers of nearly every stripe recognize exactly what's happening. First, that their work is being used as fodder to train these systems, and second, that the outcome will be these systems being used oppositionally to them, against them, to depress their wages, to degrade their working conditions, and they see that. And so many of these artists and writers and creatives have embraced the term Luddism. Technological progress is not just about the machine. It's not just about a technology. It is about who that technology serves and at what cost, at whose expense. So the Luddites, above all, were fighting for a seat at the table. And we've seen in the last decade and beyond what happens when ordinary people, when workers do not have a seat at the table, when technology is developed and deployed, especially from Silicon Valley. We see mass immiseration, we see falling wages, we see precarity. So the new Luddites are standing up and fighting back against these trends, and they understand that there's no such thing as technological progress that leaves people behind.
And now I would like to call to the podium Logan Lane.
Hi, everyone. That was wonderful. Thank you so much, Paolo. This has been incredible so far, and I'm so happy to be here. So who am I? I'm Logan Lane, and I'm one of the increasing number of 18-year-olds who survives daily life without a smartphone. I've had a flip phone. Thank you. I've had a flip phone since I was 15, and ironically, an article in the New York Times about my friends and I ditching our smartphones went viral. I've been called an inspiration to young people, the poster child of the flip phone, a sleazy proselytizer, and a pretentious show-off. However, after having had a flip phone for almost 4 years now, I really just see myself as a student. I'm studying comparative literature at Oberlin College with a Russian and Eastern European studies focus. So how did I get here? I wasn't always a Luddite, and I wasn't always a reader. Like other iPad kids, I found myself from the age of 10 longing to be famous on apps like Instagram, Snapchat, and TikTok. My phone kept the curated lives of my peers with me wherever I went, following me to the dinner table, to the bus stop, and finally to my bed, where I fell asleep groggy and irritable, often at late hours in the night, clutching my device. I constantly plotted my Instagram identity. On some days, I wanted to look effortlessly beautiful. On other days, too cool to care. Often, both at the same time, which was an impossible task. I was a compulsive creator and artistic jammer. I liked to sew, knit, and draw, but none of my crafts seemed to matter to me unless I could post them for digital praise. The way I see it now, when you have a toxic relationship with these apps, when you're not judging yourself, you're judging other people, and often I fell prey to these mean behaviors. However, sitting next to the Gowanus Canal in Brooklyn one afternoon, I felt the sudden urge to throw my iPhone into the water. I saw no difference between the garbage on my phone and the garbage surfacing in the polluted canal. A few months later, I powered off my phone, put it in a drawer, and I signed off of social media for good. Thus began my life as a Luddite. At first, it was difficult. I was bored, aimless, and flooded with free time. I missed the quick hits of dopamine from the comments and likes of my digital peers. In many ways, I had to rebuild my confidence. Yet, in solitude, I began to read constantly, and like many literary recluses, I found good friends in characters and authors. I became obsessed with the affair between Henry Miller and Anais Nin, fascinated by Murakami's accounts of running, and awed by Steinbeck's descriptions of a California coast I had never seen. I have a professor this semester, Anna Lorden, in a class about Nikolai Gogol, and I've worked with her for a year now because she also taught a seminar on Tolstoy that I took last semester. So when I told her about this talk that I was giving in New York, she was eager to hear what it was about. And like most of my professors, she didn't know that I had a flip phone up to this point, but she gave me one of the best reactions I've gotten yet. She said, "That makes sense. You always do the reading." For her class, at least. I can't say that she's wrong. Being offline by myself got lonely, and though I didn't realize it at the time, what I really wanted was some sort of community with like-minded people. My junior year of high school, this fell into my lap when one night at a student band concert in Prospect Park, I met another girl a few years my junior who also chose to use a flip phone, and we started planning what would become the Luddite Club. The Luddite Club met every Sunday for tech-free outings and book exchanges on the marble steps of the Brooklyn Public Library. High schoolers from across the city would attend regularly, starting clubs at their own schools. Together, we would march into the woods of Prospect Park, heading for a grassy knoll that we had claimed as our own. Some got flip phones and others didn't, still managing to benefit from the club's message and the few hours we would spend together offline. Most every week, a tired screenager would show up at our club, desperate for relief from the online noise that ruled their life. We handed them a book and made space on one of our hammocks. And for a few hours, we offered a glimpse of Luddite calm in a world that technology has increasingly infused with anxiety. While most of the original club members have gone off to college, the first Luddite I met, and one of my best friends, Jameson Butler, still leads a Brooklyn-based chapter. While the journey has been nothing short of enlightening, it's far from over, and every time I return home to New York for breaks from school, Jameson informs me of yet another peer who has submitted to the flip phone lifestyle. And of course, digital rejection groups are on the rise. There's Wait Until 8th, which encourages parents to wait until their children are 13 or older to give them smartphones, and an increasing number of schools banning phones inside classrooms. What I've discovered during my time at college is that we don't require a formal club to inspire this transition. The movement persists, and in the past few months alone, I've witnessed 4 first-year students take the plunge and adopt flip phones. Interested in how other people talked about their cell phone rejection, I conducted a survey among Oberlin students who had recently gotten flip phones. Jonah Barber, a third-year student on my cross-country team, wrote that getting a flip phone doesn't necessarily make you more disciplined, it simply removes the option of being distracted. He acknowledges the practical downsides. You'll have to guard carefully your physical ID card, an artifact becoming ever elusive on this campus. QR codes start to be an eyesore, jumping out from flyers and web pages, and requiring you to put in some extra research or beseech your friends for the link that you manually type in. Another student, Nessie Sliker, writes, "Especially as a dance artist, my relationship to my body has changed. I can get more done because I'm more in my body than ever before." Nessie's professor, Ann Cooper Albright, a dance scholar, talks a lot about what she calls digital disembodiment in her book, How to Land. To conclude, I want to address a common misconception. I don't believe that everyone has a toxic relationship with technology. However, let's not deceive ourselves. Technology addiction is a reality. While some of you may feel that you're misusing your phones, and if you're anything like my mom, you probably are, there's a certain vulnerability unique to younger generations having grown up digital natives. For the youth of today, the developmental experience has been polluted, it's been cheapened. Who am I becomes how do I appear? A search for authenticity becomes a rejection of authenticity. We don't all need to resort to the extreme measures of switching to flip phones or retreating to the wilderness, although I'd certainly support anyone who chooses to do so. Instead, let's start with small, conscious actions. Let's commit to moments of screen-free interaction, especially in the presence of our children, perhaps adopting offline hobbies or venturing into a good book. For I am certain, as we lift our gaze from our screens, we may find ourselves more connected than ever. Thank you.
That was great. Thank you. Thank you very much. And I'm wondering, more than digital native is almost the algorithmic native, which is almost worse. But anyway, we'll talk about it later. Thank you for this beautiful contribution. And now a video by Kay Alaro McDowell.
Hi, my name is Kay Alaro McDowell, and I am going to just briefly describe a taxonomy of media that I developed for an essay commissioned by Gropius Bao. It's available on their website now. This framework looks at the history of media in 4 phases: broadcast media, immersive media, what Fred Turner has called the democratic surround, network media, and neural media. In this description, each of these phases produces a type of subject and a type of space, and those are compounded and expand as media evolves. So broadcast media produces a demographic-based identity. Immersive media produces a so-called democratic subject that chooses from an array of images, often expressed inside of a dome in the mid-century period. Network media explodes that dome and puts image feeds everywhere, enabling us to constantly create new identities through the consumption and reproduction of images. And neural media, which includes but is not limited to AI, encapsulates those image sets, learns from them, and tries to embed us and understand us through our location within large data sets as understood by machine learning models. So when it comes to the production of space, the production of subjectivity, each of these media types is used by systems of power, by political systems to produce a desirable subject. So when we look at neural media, we are looking at a system with its own technical properties, its own mathematical structures, but also one that produces subjects in the embedding space, in the high dimensional latent space of machine learning, and reproduces those subjects through how those systems are built. If you'd like to learn more or get deep into the historical details in this framework, check out the essay on Gropius Bell's website.
And now, Kevin Munger at the podium, please.
All right, thank you all for coming. That was a great transition to what I'll be talking about now. The social media whirlpool is an excerpt from my book, which was published yesterday with the YouTube apparatus. So it's good timing. Yeah, and so following on Kay's media periodization, I will be using Willem Flusser's framework, which begins with the world. And the beginning was the world, and there was no need to produce any codes. There were just animals and other things going on. But then the first monkey essentially went insane and stopped believing in the world. And so this is when humans were born. We exist when we step outside of the world, and we become alienated from the world, and we begin to use images in order to understand the world. And so this is the period of magic. But eventually we stopped believing in the images that we'd created, and so we produced texts which pointed to those images that tried to explain those images. This was the period of history, of democracy, of liberalism, science, the period that we're coming out of, because, as many of us have noted, we no longer really believe in the texts. And so we are producing what Flusser calls technical images. And the real problem, the crisis at present, is that we don't know what those technical images mean. He calls for the production of technical imagination, and I could spend all day on this, but the point that's really critical has to do with how these different types of media produce different conceptions of causality and time. So in the first period of image and magic, this is the time of eternal recurrence, of the seasons, of circularity, of things simply recurring. In the period of text and of history, we have this linear progress. We're going from the past to the future. We have some sense of politics, which is saying we were trying to figure out which direction to go, but we still believe that we're going somewhere. But the problem is the current period, the period of the technical image of post-history, is one of circular progress, or cybernetic time. So here, we're going faster and faster, but we're not going anywhere at all. I think the best way to think about this is this switch from the chronological to the algorithmic feed that really points to the beginning of this algorithmic time that Kay talked about in the previous presentation here. And so the algorithmic feed, though, contains the thing that's most distinct about social media in my framework is the feedback, okay? And so Mr. Beast, when he's reflecting on his life and his accomplishments and how far he's come, he's talking about how many views he's gotten year on year. And so this is the sense of which we're not going anywhere. He's not making videos for any reason. He's just wanting to get more and more views. And so this is the sense of circular progress that we're talking about. And so I know you're all thinking, this is not an AI image. I made this. So we have the circularity in the top left. We have the linear progress in the top right. But the bottom here, there's this stream in which things still happen. The end of history that Fukuyama talked about didn't mean that things don't happen anymore. But we don't have the kind of linear grand narratives anymore. Instead, we have the circularity of the whirlpool. And so we have events proceeding, but then on social media, we have these little eddies, these little whirlpools in which this intensification happens. We're not going anywhere except down, faster and faster, and down. All right? And so when we try to use the tools that we've developed from the previous era, the tools of conceptual reason to explain why things are happening, this produces paranoia. So these quotes are all from Willem Flusser's 1973 book, Communicology, published last year by Stanford in English for the first time. When we try to use the tools of conceptual reason to explain what's happening on social media, this produces paranoia, this false knowledge. And this is why conspiracy theories and paranoid thinking are kind of the native mode of thought on these platforms. All right? And so it's not the case, as in the era of ideology, that there's some purpose. It's not the case that Nikocado, Avocado, and Hungry Fat Chick decided, I want to eat as many extreme blue Takis fire noodles as I can. They don't have a purpose in doing this. The reason why this is happening, and we have 15 million views on this mukbang video, is because of the intensity of the social media whirlpool. We have people who begin to eat more food. They discover that they get more views by doing this. Then they go and eat more and more food, but there's no purpose here. There's no meaning. Right? And so the reason why this is intolerable is to be programmed by the producers of content don't have any meaning for what they're doing. So there are all these genres that are native to social media, like the mukbang, like ASMR, which emerges from the fact that if you make some weird sounds with the microphone, you get more views. It doesn't mean anything to be doing this, and now the most extreme version of the NPC streamers who are just responding to the stream. Again, we're just making puppets of ourselves, and so the feedback has come to dominate any sense of meaning. And so the real problem, Flusser says, is that this is intolerable not because the programming works so well, but because it works progressively better. This is what this linear, circular progress means. As we continue to flow around in the social media whirlpool, the programming just gets stronger and stronger. So the idea of some kind of situationist post that would cause us to realize we're not doing anything that matters, and like the perfect post which would reveal the meaninglessness of the entire social media whirlpool is not possible. There's no hope the circle will somehow crack open. The longer it gyrates, the better it functions. So that's the really scary prospect of and why I think that using these platforms for some kind of political, ideological goal is a dead end. And so this, I think, is why we find ourselves in the belly of the Mr. Beast. Right? So Mr. Beast, for those of you who don't know, is the most popular YouTuber in the world. And so what he has done by chasing those views throughout his life is discovered the forms of content which allow him to get the most views. He has kind of conquered social media. He's the most famous YouTuber. YouTuber is perhaps the most important platform for making money. And yet, I think that the key the problem is that this does not mean anything. And so the solution Flusser suggests, and I endorse this, is that we simply have to recommit ourselves to communication and to meaning. We have to communicate with each other as opposed to with the social media apparatus. And so when we are optimizing our communication in the forms of posts that get the most views, we actually are not engaging in this central human act of communicating with the other. And so I think that's really the only way forward.
Very excellent. Thank you. Thank you so much, Kevin. So funny, I read echoes of National Enquirer everywhere, you know, from like at the beginning when Stefan was showing all of those monsters, and now also you when you're showing, you know, it's really National Enquirer everywhere. So 2 videos now, Christopher John Muller and Stephanie Suganami.
The Promethean Gap is a phenomenon first observed by the German Jewish thinker Günther Anders in the 1940s, and it describes a curious inversion of knowledge that happens around complex technological objects. Although they're the product of human knowledge and collaborative efforts, we as individuals cannot possibly know how our interaction or uptake of a device will contribute to the kind of new world that these objects can create around themselves. And this translates into the digital age. So even though I can somehow know the smartphone and I kind of direct it in all sorts of conscious ways and I kind of use it as a tool, as I'm told, I'm on some level also aware that my interaction with this device is generating data in all sorts of ways. This data might make a minuscule contribution to algorithmic bias. It might be used to combat it. It might create an application that costs jobs or saves it, right? But it will be impossible for me as an individual to know what my contribution in this was. And I will also not have a say, right? And the reason for this is that the process is so abstract that it's very hard for us to adequately care. And in the absence of this kind of felt bodily friction, it's very hard to be invested and to try and hold people to account with what is done. Now, ironically, this gap has become so big that one of the most collective and collaborative human endeavors ever created, the data-driven internet itself, is now completely dehumanized, right? We speak of smart things and not of the smart humans who make all of this possible through their kind of data generation. Now, for others, this means, this gap means that the image of the self-aware, thinking, feeling I that is celebrated in Western thought is ridiculously obsolete and absurd, right? And he's asking us to develop new templates, new ways of thinking of politics and ethics that can take this gap into account.
Oh, Stephanie, we have another video. Okay. Suspense.
Instagram's really allowed for me to make a living. You know, I've been able to build a successful brand through using the app, and I feel very fortunate for that. I've been able to connect with millions of people across the world. I've been able to use my platform to advocate for social issues that are near and dear to my heart and to share information with people who otherwise might not have had access to that kind of information. And I think that that's a really powerful tool. The way that I use the platform has evolved so much over the years, and I can only see it evolving even more as Instagram kind of changes the model and changes the algorithm and changes the way that they want us to interact with the app. And there is frustration as someone who has built a business through social media in being so controlled by one company. They can control your business, they can control who sees your page, they can control the things that you get to see when you're scrolling on your Instagram. And so, yeah, that is a bit scary and frustrating, and I don't think that I will live on that app very much longer. And I think as an adult, creating safeguards for myself and understanding the effects on my mental health has really changed the way that I engage online. And I think as a society, we really need to be mindful and create safeguards for our kids, because it can be a dangerous addiction, just scrolling online all day. And so, you know, there obviously is good and bad with both sides. You always hope that the good will outweigh the bad, but I think it's one of those things where we're just gonna have to wait and see.
Thank you. And now our grand finale is Nimei Ndolo. Please, Nimei. Oh, yes, water indeed.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, yeah, water in a can. Sorry. Water's great, but in a can, it's superior. Hi, my name is Nimei Ndolo. I am a former techie former front-end developer, software developer. I am now an influencer. I like to reclaim the term. I know when I say influencer, it conjures up certain images of certain things, and I like to reclaim that term to not be those certain things. I'm an influencer, content creator, whatever. Also, bear with me. There will be rambling and yapping, but this will be really fun. So, listening today to all the different perspectives has been honestly interesting. And in my everyday life, of course, I'm an influencer. On TikTok, I have 2.4 million followers. On Instagram, I have 894,000. On YouTube, I have 10,000. Twitter, 6,000. Threads, 145,000. So my life is very closely tied with social media at this point. I'm in the words of Sum 41, in too deep. So living this life, especially in this current day and age of late stage capitalism, my knee-jerk reaction is to be like, oh man, it sucks. However, again, everything in life is about balance, clearly, as we all know. Everything has a good side, a bad side. Everything is dual, has a dual nature. I have an interesting perspective on this because I am not a digital native. I was born in 1994. I am 29. I will be 30 in August. So I grew up in a time where my life was not controlled by these things. I was able to consume media. I had a typical, normal, healthy relationship with media and burgeoning social media back in the day. And I feel like that allows me to have a different approach to how I allow social media, or to the role that I allow social media in my life. Over the years, of course, as this became a job, sorry, give me 1 second. I opened this and I haven't sipped it once. Yikes. Yeah. Here. Sorry, I love canned water. LaCroix Pure. That's what I got for. So I grew up at a time. So I remember when growing up, before having my life consumed by social media. It wasn't my job at the time. It was just something that, I would go on the computer at home and do. MySpace, Facebook, whatever. Back then, I was certainly way more creative. Of course, way more creative. I had time to wander off in the woods, go do things. I had time to write. I had time to draw, whatever. And recently, this talk is actually happening, so it's very relevant to my life. Recently, I got to a point in my life where I realized that I was addicted to my phone. And at this point in my life, it wasn't even an addiction to my phone out of the love of it. It was completely necessity. At the point in my career where I'm at the point where I have a team. I have a manager, a publicist, a coordinator, and everything. So if I don't post, I hear about it. There are many contracts. So there are scripts constantly due. There's a lot. And because of that, I would stay glued to my phone. And because of that, I would also find myself feeling like a slave to my audience. And that's when my relationship with the internet began to change, which wasn't good. Earlier, Paula showed the slideshow with the phone vaults. They looked dumb. I use them. They're dumb, but they're effective. They're fantastic. It has helped me to walk that line of having a good relationship with social media, also having work-life balance, also being able to consume social media, which I, funnily enough, only recently started doing. And that's a long story. We'll get into that another day. But again, everything in life goes back to balance. I today met Logan, who is one end of the spectrum, a luddite. And then, you have me, other side of the spectrum, who makes a living off of social media, who has a wild relationship, a gnarly relationship with social media. And of course, not everything in life is black and white. Social media does serve good purposes. There's, a few words that have come around in the past few years. People say, wow, we are all living the same life. The way that we found this out, the way that we found out that we all have these shared joint experiences is via social media. memes. We all find, I guess, like even like camaraderie in like the hieroglyphic nature of memes and so on and so forth. So social media does foster connectedness. And that is a good thing. That's a good thing. So yes, there is this human created thing of the internet, but we still are not losing our humanity. We still do maintain that humanity and ability to connect with each other. But at the same time, balance is good. Throw the phone away. Or not throw it away. Put it in a box. Lock it. Go outside. And that's what I do now. Now, my chill out time is I either, yes, if I'm using a phone, but I plug in an audiobook and I go walk outside, or, smoke a little, go on, a nice little walk, wander off into Bushwick, and it's peaceful. So, just balance, I guess. 1 minute left. Yeah, dude, I was so scared that I was gonna have to be like, I yield my time to the chair and then like have to like walk off. You can tell I did Model UN in high school. 1 minute. Okay, this has been an absolute blast. But yeah, basically balance. Not everything's black and white. Life runs on a spectrum. Let's rock it, y'all.
Thank you. Woohoo! Thank you, May. Thank you all very much. And now I can ask you all to come here and sit, and also Christina. She's debuting on the dais today. So come, Christina, sit here. Christina there, I here, so we bookend you. And please sit here. And I would like also to ask the people that are in our plush overflow rooms, please to feel free to send questions. I'm going to give you my address. I'm going to be completely addressable. It's you have it already. It's Paola_Antonelli@MoMA.org. Just email me, and I will try to ask your questions. And if not, I just had an idea that Christina will hate or love. I don't know. We should start publishing all the unanswered questions, right? Yeah. So I don't know if we have room. We have a very Web 2 website because it's very templated, and I don't know how we can publish them, but we'll figure it out because it would be great. So anyway, Christina, the first question to you, please.
Sure, thank you very much. I wanted to start by asking a question to Stefan. Paola had mentioned something that comes from your work, this idea of the reading addiction. Essentially, reading too much or too fast at a certain time was thought to lead to delusions, distortions of reality. Today we talk about TikTok as causing brain rot. So we were curious whether certain media are intrinsically bad for us, or if it's more kind of a process of adaptation, adjusting of social norms, how that kind of process happens over time.
Well, thank you for the question. Yeah, so reading addiction is a 18th century anxiety about, now people would be very happy if their children read, most of them.
Yeah.
but in the 18th century, people were very concerned that people didn't read scholarship or the Bible, but instead they read fiction, and they read ghost novels or robber novels, and they can no longer distinguish between reality and what they read in fiction. So and they become physiologically addicted to it. I do think it has a lot to do with there's a lot of entertainment literature being published, so the novelty and the newness of these genres and texts that are available to these young people is there, and there's always an anxiety about youth and new media too, I think. So it's so you find that also early 20th century, people are very concerned about cinema, and people cannot, and children, the white male scholars, they say women, primitives, and children cannot distinguish between what they see on the screen and what is reality. And they will mistake the moving image for reality. They will they will be spellbound and controlled by these images. So I do think that there are these media panics, and we can, and the media panic disappears when the newness of the medium has, faded. And for a while, when I did my historical work, I thought, oh, isn't this funny? People say this, people say this. And now I think maybe it's not just funny and cultural conservatism, but there is something also a little bit inherently addicting about these technologies. And so I think getting used to the technology and finding ways of dealing with them helps with the addiction, but I do think that you can be when you're very immersed in something or very attached to something, it's a very strong relationship to it.
Thank you. So, Tega, and one of the questions that came to my mind as I was listening to you all is what is really a counter narrative? You know, what is it? Is it an antidote? Is it like a noise canceling kind of like feedback? And then I was thinking of your work that you showed here. You showed 3 projects, 2 in depth and 1 quickly. But it seemed like it was a way to turn technology onto its own head. And I wanted to ask you, besides the Bushwick, Analytica, and the synthetic messenger, you were about to talk about how to deal with the environmental vicious circle and kind of also build this counter something within the corporations that are controlling the environmental cycle. So can you say more about that and about the role of you as an artist? You don't have to touch anything. It just start talking and it works.
Yeah, I mean, in the last few years, I've been looking at carbon markets and the way that computing is being called upon to deal with issues of climate change and ecological management. And it's a complicated situation where I think we're in this crisis so deep that we need to be considering, we must be considering, you know, technological response to climate change. But at the same time, and this is the point I ended on, is like we need to be asking questions about who owns these technologies, who's controlling them, what, you know, forms of domination are they introducing. And so if we look at some of the issues we've seen today around digital platforms, optimization, misinformation, like what does that look like when we're talking about monitoring carbon flows, right? I mean, misinformation in a political context, misinformation around elections or so on leads to certain worlds that we might be living in. But misinformation when we're talking about the carbon cycle and sequestering all the CO2 we put in the air is a very different, has very different consequences, right? And so I think we need to be thinking about and looking at these, asking these critical questions at this very early stage of carbon markets and how we're going to be managing the
And are you already
crisis.
planning an intervention or a work similar to the ones that you've done
Yeah,
with the kids?
I'm also working on another collaboration with Sam, and we're trying to build our own bespoke carbon registry. So we like to sort of take up the technologies and appropriate them and sort of repurpose them.
Invert the whirlpool.
Yeah, that's right.
Now, I've been really thinking of this idea of counter-narrative and what it means in practice. So we'll get to that question, but now I give the word back to Christina.
I wanted to ask a question that put in conversation Kevin and Logan, because Kevin, as you were speaking and you're talking about Flooster's idea that the solution might be communication with each other rather than with the apparatus, immediately I thought, okay, is that Logan? But then also thinking about, can we really sort of escape it? So, because she had given examples of encountering QR codes, or even the idea of like when you're doing a craft, you're thinking about how it then will enter social media. So even when you're not directly engaging with the apparatus, let's say through a screen, it's kind of structured society or our interactions beyond that. So I'd be curious to hear, like Logan, if you think you've actually kind of moved out of it, and Kevin, your kind of thoughts as well.
So just looking at all of the TikToks and the memes on screen, many of them I recognized or had just encountered in my day-to-day already. I feel like it's impossible to totally detach from the machine, even with what I'm doing, even just in interactions with friends or overhearing conversation. And so yeah, I don't think that you can totally detach in this current state, or at least you'd have to be in, you know, total solitude. Yeah, so in order to foster connections with other people, I think maybe you have to give up, you know, this desire to be completely detached from what's popular on the internet right now. And I think that's also totally okay. Like I was really happy that you shared all of these TikToks. Like some of them I hadn't seen, and just all the stuff about brain rot is like, that is so relatable. I love that. And I often actually go to my friends and say like, oh, I overheard this internet trend. Like, can you explain it to me? And I find so much joy in that. So yeah, I don't think it's totally possible to detach, and I think that's totally acceptable as well.
Yeah, I mean, as they say, we live in a society. So if we were to like stop looking at the QR codes, or if any specific technology were to be removed, we would still be living in a world which is structured by other people, and I think that is ultimately a good thing. Right? We have to accept what has come before us, both technologically, institutionally, the structure of our government, the amount of carbon in the atmosphere, the number of humans on the planet. So I think one of the early responses that was a bit more popular a few years ago to this kind of creeping anxiety around social media brain rot was the anarcho-primitivist movement that really wanted to actually blow everything up and return to being monkeys. And I think that is obviously just like kind of a childish fantasy and also very violent. So, right, the idea that we can step outside is false. We also have the fantasies of we're going to just create our own country on boats, or we're going to buy our own private islands and create our own city, and it'll just be us, and it'll be perfect. These are all ultimately fantasies, and the challenge of what I think of as democracy is figuring out how to actually figure out how to work and live with other people, but that actually requires being aware of and interested in other people. And so much of what happens on social media is you're not engaging with other people, you're engaging with the representation of themselves that they have created in order to get the most likes in the apparatus. And that is obviously not actually engaging with the other. And so I think there's really no silver bullet here. I think being embodied and looking people in the eye is a very good step, but ultimately it just requires negotiating all of these circumstances, thinking about the other party that you're communicating with.
Yeah, it brings me back to what Nimei was also talking about, getting to the point of resenting your audience, because, at that, you almost feel imprisoned. And, you are an influencer, so is Stephanie, bona fide influencers. So you've had great opportunities, and now also you have frustrations, which sounds to me like having an employer. It sounds to me a little bit like my relationship with MoMA. So, it's really about negotiating. The problem is control, right? But control is almost impossible whenever you have an institution behind you. So my whole career at MoMA has been finding rabbit holes to do what I like to do, and MoMA has enabled me to do so. You feel that kind of trust relationship, because I do trust the institution, is something that you can have also with something as disembodied as a social media platform corporation, or you're lacking that. Does Instagram listen to you? Stephanie was saying that it doesn't really listen to her. Can you have an influence on what enables you to be an influencer?
Yeah. So specifically, I wish you had actually asked anyone else if Instagram listens to them. Because for me, the answer is yes. I am repped by all three of the big socials. So TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube. And I have reps at each one. So I tell them something is up. I talk to them about threads or anything. And some stuff happens. They have a lot of us creators like in little focus groups, and they take advice. So yes. However, do I feel that I have, or sorry, let me reiterate just to make sure that I have the question. Do I feel like I have any control over the information that I give my audience, or?
No, over the way you want to give the information to your audience. Like, does the algorithm prevent you from reaching people that you want to reach?
Honestly, it's a double-sided question. Sorry, a double-sided answer. There is, everybody's heard of social media creators being pigeonholed, being put in niches. And, it happens because that's how, not just the internet, but also society functions. You have people who, collect coins over there in their corner. You have the LARPers over there. You have the people who like to play Catan on Monday nights over there. On the internet, you have the exact same thing. You have book talk, you have finance talk, you have so-and-so whatever, all small groups. So niching does help. However, it does become a double-edged sword when you do want to branch out. And this I noticed early on in my career when at first I was in like the finance social media sector and then the tech comedy sector. I noticed, I noticed that you know it wasn't broad enough. So I went into just general comedy, and it did pretty well, and I was able to I guess I had control in that sense of being able to decide what niche, what general broad niche I want to be in, how broad I wanted my niche to be. But at the end of the day, a job is a job. And, you're gonna, at some point, again, just like with the Mr. Beast example, you're gonna figure out exactly what gets you the most views. You're gonna figure out every single thing until it becomes a formula. And then you will replicate this formula. And, sometimes I could say that I have freedom to present myself however I want to with my audience. Yeah, I could do whatever I want. But are they gonna watch it? No. So I don't wanna take that risk of putting in all that time, so I'm going to do what works. And again, that just comes back to, I guess, like late stage capitalism and me just being, a product of that. All of us are all products, by the way, so don't judge me. But, yeah. So yes, I guess I do have control, but if I do have control, or if I do exercise that control, it could bite me in the ass. Mm-hmm. So double answer.
By the way, Nimei is about to launch also her podcast, and I will listen. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
That's going to be good. Christina, on to you.
A recurring theme in tonight's discussion is the Luddites, and also kind of branching off this idea of agency we're talking about. I think you each put forward a different way or mode of operating in a way to kind of regain agency. So whether it's, an individual act, or thinking about how we operate at a more kind of like systemic level. But I guess the question is that the Luddites were asking is like, can we ever kind of regain agency over determining our technological futures, or are we kind of just going to be forever at the whims of larger kind of?
Can we regain agency? Yeah. Well, yeah, go for it.
Yay. Mm-hmm. I think we already actually have agency. And again, I have a more optimistic view on this. Again, I guess it comes from me being an idealist, back in high school. And I guess I still haven't grown up in a way, but I still think that we do have a bit of agency. I don't think it's that bleak to say that we don't have agency. If you want, you can turn off the phone. If you want, you can log out of social media completely. If everybody has that agency within themselves to assess their own personal relationship with social media and then to act accordingly in their own best interests. I do think that we do have that agency. But again, I also could just be thinking of it in an extremely technical way and probably not in, probably not in the most, never mind. I think we have agency as far as the internet
Kevin,
goes.
you want to say something?
Yeah.
And then I want to ask Tega.
I'll take the pessimistic take, and I think that this comes out of this kind of technological, deterministic angle where, yes, there have been all these new media technologies and there have been panics about how they affect how human beings live. And to some extent, they've all been right. We have adapted, we've changed. The nature of how humans interact with each other and the natural world is changing as media technology changes the information flows and things like this. And I think that at present, the problem is simply that the rate at which media technology, information technology is developing is beyond the capacity of any of our regulatory apparatus to respond. So the natural cycle of the human lifespan, how long it takes for a human to become mature, these have fixed time periods, 80 years, 18 years. And if the pace of technological change remains as fast as it is today, we don't have the capacity to meaningfully adapt. So parents are living in different worlds than their children, and so we have this alienation between generations, and that seems to me to kind of deny people the fundamental dignity of the ability to choose the world in which they live. So I think that I'm in favor of kind of like trying to slow down technological progress as a first cut at regaining agency.
Oh, Stefan, you want to say something too?
Yeah, I also think, though, that, like how we use technologies is not completely prescribed by the technology, right? There's a wide range of possibilities or contingencies, right? So there's nothing that is inherent to the smartphone that produces Instagram or YouTube or Facebook the way they're being used now. And right now, the economic model, how, it's via user engagement, revenue stream. It's completely possible to use the very similar or same technology in different ways. is. It's like it's not happening in our society for specific reasons. And I do think that technological change is actually a moment where there's technological factors, there's social factors, political factors, cultural factors. They converge and they kind of shape then the aggregate between humans and technologies. But there's a lot of variability there, and I think we can try to move these things in a direction that we are more happy about than others. So I do think there is quite a bit of agency in our decision of how we use these technologies.
And Tega?
Yeah, I often think of my work as explorations in agency. So where is there a little bit of leverage? How can these technologies be misused or skewed towards a different political agenda than maybe what's happening in the mainstream? But, I think too often the conversation in agency, we frame it as sort of what an individual can do. And I think in the context of digital media, that agency is directly related to affluence, right? So if you're an Uber driver or relying on apps to earn a living, you can't put your phone in one of those little lock boxes that I also own one.
So I'm looking at all the questions in the meantime.
Right. So I think the question then is, more interesting question perhaps around agency is like, how do we exercise our collective agency, right? How do we make a case for better regulation of these platforms and thinking about actually the forces that are sort of underlying their economic models and so forth?
And, I haven't asked you because your whole presentation was exactly about that, but I have, I'm going to start the questions from the audience by giving priority to the overflow room. So one of the questions from Alphonse was actually for Nime and Tega, but I want to ask you instead. They ask very poignantly, when does the internet end and life begin? So before and after giving up social media, did that line move?
I definitely feel like I had to relearn the kind of like the livelihood of everything. It was like I was kind of coming out of this world as like an alien, and in order to cross that line, it wasn't so much that I had to get off devices, but that I had to find other devices. By that I don't mean devices, but like things to do, things to spend my time on, and so in terms of where it ended and where it began, I feel like you can be off devices and you can still have this kind of brain rot ideology about your life, and I don't know. It's not so much that like you need to be totally that you get off the device and then you've completely transformed your life. And there is like a level of a couple of weeks where you're transforming and you're realizing that you can fill these gaps in this and this way. Yeah, I don't know how I answered that question.
No,
but
you did answer it. So thank you very much. And then I'm gonna do another prioritization to Joshua Citarella, because he's one of the authors of The Dark Forest, so I think he's in the overflow. It's a question for Kevin. How might the coming flood of AI content reshape the ad-driven internet? And that's something that also Stefan could address. Yeah.
Well, I think this is a case in which we can't, it doesn't really feel like we can choose not to engage with AI. So the companies have made this thing, and now we all have to deal with it. So this is a way in which the technology is overflowing into the world, even though no one really asked for it. In terms of how to deal with it, it seems like everyone is coming to the conclusion that it's just getting worse. It's just in front of our eyes, it's collapsing. So it feels as though everyone is racing to the bottom to create as much of this AI content as possible. But the response, at least it seems, from my perspective, is that people are just kind of pulling away. So we do still have the spectacle of there's the case of the shrimp Jesus and all of these other very bizarre and religious, very stupid AI memes circulating on Boomer Facebook. So there is an audience for this meaningless content, But I think that in general, people are really, I guess my personal aesthetic response is when I see presentations or read articles that have mid-journey AI-generated images, I just think it looks cheap and cheesy, and I would really kind of like don't like it. And so what I hope is that we all just decide that, oh, this actually isn't that cool, and that we ignore it.
I actually love Antiverse. So, Stefan, what do you think? More Pep S and Bad Boys?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the way we use the term AI kind of personifies the technology, right? It's not a person with intentions. It's it's software. It's machine learning, and I do think that of course, it will become much cheaper and much faster to produce certain things. You can have computer-generated images that look real and that are not. But you have a long history of image manipulation. You have a long history of fakes before AI. So I do think there is no such thing as a singularity.
Good.
Yeah.
No singularity. Okay, let's open now to the audience, and we will let Bruno and who else? Oh, yeah, you can choose. Yeah, okay.
Hi, thank you so much. Anna Scapellis, Professor of Sociology at CUNY. My question is about the proliferation of meaningless trash content. And so, Stefan, you've shown us that there's always been this panic about proliferation of people not reading and all these things. And so I was thinking specifically, do you have any insights, or could you tell us something about proliferation, especially of trash content? And then the question to the overall panel would be, what possibilities are there for getting nuanced and meaningful counter-narratives back into the mainstream, and how?
So let's start with the question for Stefan, and then we'll take, I'll keep that counter-narrative thing going. Awesome.
Yeah, I don't have a great answer about the proliferation of trash content. I mean, in some way, I'm more concerned about the big lie or QAnon or things like this. So if it's trash content that circulates, then it's at least not super harmful, you could say. Mm-hmm. So. And it, it's like, and it absorbs some of that bandwidth. So,
so what is a counter narrative to QAnon and to the big lie?
So, what's the counter narrative to the big? Well, that's a difficult one, right? That's why but I do think you could. So one that's very still somewhat defensive would be, how all the money gets raised from these poor donors, right? Small amount donors giving money to Trump to pay his legal team, like all that money gets disenfranchised for other nefarious purposes. That's a story you can easily tell, right? So that would be one counter narrative to the big lie that you can tell.
But it will stay
but
within the people that already believe it.
Well, that's another problem, of course. But I do think that a really powerful power narrative is not just negative, but actually gives. I do think a lot of people who follow all of this conspiracy theory and all of I do think to change them individually is very difficult, right? So though the human interaction that Kevin advocates for may be quite crucial, if you're a member of a cult, you will not come out of a cult so easily without that, I think. But I do think some utopian progressive ideal is actually part of a counter-narrative. Mm-hmm. And I'm not the person who can come up with what that utopia will be, but I do think, and because I'm too skeptical, but I do think that's what we need, actually. So.
Does anybody else in the panel want to talk about this idea of counter-narrative and what it could be? Antidote, white noise, noise canceling?
Proliferation of trash content. May I talk on that? Speak on that?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the term trash content, and again, this is just my opinion, I feel, again, meaning is subjective. You look at a cave drawing, and then you look at AI shrimp Jesus. Sorry. You look at, a cave drawing and AI shrimp Jesus. Be for real. What does the cave drawing mean? Anyone can spin any meaning out of that. Same thing with shrimp Jesus. However, of course, as time has gone on, we look at these cave drawings as something, great, super cool. It's not trash. what separates that? What makes that not trash, but makes Shrimp Jesus trash? And I know it's like, sorry.
Time. Yeah.
Time, exactly. And I feel like that's also just not fair. There is a lot of, stuff on the internet today. And they are all products of human creation. Anything that a human created is going to have some sort of meaning to it, no matter if the meaning is stupid or if it's whatever. Again, things that have meaning, of course, have an arbitrary nature. And just because something isn't completely black and white, like this thing is so great or this thing is clearly bad, doesn't mean that it's trash. So I would like to argue against the use of the term. I mean, of course, everybody's going to use it.
I hear you. I mean,
yeah, but either way.
It's quite a viewpoint, yeah. Do you want to say something about counter-narratives, Tega, or Logan? No? I mean, I would do a whole salon on counter-narratives. Want to say something?
Yeah, well, just while we were talking about this, I was thinking about, I don't know if you guys have ever heard of 75 Hard, but it's basically 75 days. You try and eat healthy, and you don't drink. Maybe, I think you're supposed to exercise twice a day also. But the goal is not really to convert you to this new lifestyle, but just to make you more thoughtful about your everyday exercise routine or how much you're drinking and what you're eating. So in terms of a counter narrative, I'm just thinking maybe we ought to normalize, and it's terrible because I wish that I, was a TikToker and could make a video about this to normalize it. But like maybe we go not 75, 35 days, and with some level of detachment from our screens, and this is really just on an individual level, like an answer on an individual level. But I don't know. Maybe this concept of a more short-term detachment would seem more appealing to people, and I think we might have like a better effect in the end than simply saying you should get off your phone.
Trying to. Okay.
So we're sitting in the Museum of Modern Art.
Oh, hi, Tom.
Hello. Hi. We're in the Museum of Modern Art, and the sort of attention model of the museum is slow looking and absorption. And there may be ways in which not every viewer does that, but I'm just wondering if anybody on the panel, if you flip that and think about how social media is associated with anxiety and depression, and museum visits are associated with thriving, has anybody thought about the idea of the museum in any way as a counter to social media?
Interesting. Museum is counter-narrative of sorts or counter-state. Who wants to take this on? It's interesting, Tom. Go for it, you may. Yeah.
I didn't entertain that idea at all, but I mean, it makes sense. Again, in a museum, you have a bunch of content. Yeah, it's content. And, you're kind of, you're consuming it in an analog way with your eyes. It's old-fashioned. It's fantastic. It's biological technology. It's, eyes. So, as a counter-narrative, that works. Yeah, this is a long-winded way to say I agree.
What was the inauthentic behavior, right? It was interesting. It remained with me. It's very authentic as a behavior, but it's actually in contrast. So I'm not going to take it as a question, but rather as something that will stay with me, Tom. So thank you. Who's next? Thank you.
Thank you. I was going to speculate another counter-narrative of the recent resurgence in interest in indigenous cultures, psychedelics, of kind of a counter-narrative to the whirlpool that you're mentioning, people who've got to the edge of it and are now coming back to natural systems, reconnecting with nature and cultures that connect directly to nature, completely disintermediating any kind of content. I'm wondering what your response to that counter-narrative, perhaps.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so I think that, it clearly makes sense, and I think it's a good kind of practice for this each of us to cultivate these other ways of being and to really push the limits of our own personal experience of things. And I think going back to we saw the 70s hippies at the beginning here, and so I think that to me, the part that we can maybe remove from social media to make it more healthy has to do with the metrics and the optimization. And this, I think, speaks to the way in which we engage with the rest of the world. So we have money as the way to measure our value. We have the view count as a way to measure our value on social media. And we have this orientation of optimizing things. And as opposed to this idea of balance, which I think was really part of the first impulse of this kind of cybernetic idea of the whole Earth being in balance. And so I think, well, maybe as a counter narrative, it's not as compelling because we're not going anywhere. But if you accept the premise that, I mean, with contemporary technology, we don't really have this kind of mass ideological movement that characterized the 20th century, we're not going to be able to go anywhere anyway. And so if that's the case, perhaps the best we can hope for is getting back in touch with nature and ensuring a kind of balance with all of our surroundings, as opposed to this kind of extractive optimization of the smartphones and everything else.
Well, there are some others, and while the next one comes, I'm going to ask something of Logan. Logan, as a design curator, I want to ask you, why the flip phone? Why not the chocolate bar phone or other phones? I mean, I just hit that movement of the flip. I mean, I've always found it really seductive, but I want to understand.
So I wish that it was because it is really satisfying to just slam it shut after a phone call, but it's not that. The way that current cellular plans work, they're making it incredibly difficult to get a flip phone, and so there's very few models in stock, and so that's why a lot of my friends and I had the same exact phone. Because AT&T and Verizon were issuing the same phones, and if you were to get another model and then put your phone, put your number to it, put your SIM card in, they're like the companies will sometimes flag the phone and say like, the bad stuff is happening here. We're gonna only allow you to text and call, or which would be fine. But sometimes people will get other phones that like have Spotify on them. There's actually the construction company Cat has a phone that is very popular in the community, but it does exactly this if you put it to your provider. So I have always wanted other models, but I've always just had the exact same one for the past 4 years, even though I've gone through 5 or 6 phones.
Okay, the myth is now revealed. Thank you. So who's next? Bruno?
Oh, hey, hi, I'm Dennis. The panel's great, so thank you. I'm just wondering, like, where does everything end, right? Where, you're walking down the street and a third of people are glued to their phones. The world is trending towards screens that you wear on your face. Where does it end? How does it end? And like, what happens next?
Tega, do you mind answering? Yeah, you're the artist.
I don't think that, I mean, there's no one ending. I would posit that we're going to have the folks walking around with screens on their faces. We're going to have people who've radically produced different relationships with these technologies. But I think also, I think we also have to contend with like their materiality as well. So a big elephant in the room with AI and a lot of these data-driven, surveillance-driven technologies are their material consequences as well. So the incredible amounts of energy and water and so forth that they use. And, even the Sam Altmans of the world now are saying that AI is about to hit a huge energy crisis because of what is required to train these models and keep them running, and we're in this sort of twilight zone of VC funding and where we're not actually paying these costs yet. So I think that's also a factor that's going to come in to the way we see these roll out into the future as well.
Thank you for this wake-up call. We sometimes don't think of the underneath of it all. I mean, we had Kate Crawford speak here a lot about the underbelly of AI, the infrastructure of it. We're just the surface of the problem. So, thank you. Another?
Hi, yes.
Jay.
What Logan said about 75 Hard made me wonder this. Is it possible to normalize anything in any meaningful way without the use of technology and social media? And if not, does the very use of tech and social media undermine the counter narrative that we're trying to normalize?
Who wants to take this? Tony May.
I mean, technology is like, pen, paper, back in the day, papyrus. Straight up, I think that's technology that qualifies. To spread a certain narrative, like let's say back in the days of cuneiform, someone wanted to talk shit about his neighbor. He could cuneiform script that on some paper and, post that narrative, in a few places, and, the narrative is spread. So, yeah, no, I think technology is a tool. Oh, never mind. Sorry, I just started thinking about like a town crier, which technically, that is tech. I mean, is your voice technology? Do we say yes?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay,
Well,
fine. So yeah, no, it is impossible, I
use
guess.
it.
Yeah.
I don't know. But I'm playing favorites. I want Jay.
Hello, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, full disclosure, I'm deaf, and so I'm actually using AI to caption you on my phone while we have a live captioner nearby over there who is terrific and way better than my phone. So I was loving the comment about luddite calm, because as a deaf person, I just naturally have a deaf calm in the world. I don't have to hear a lot of the noise. And I'm wondering what kind of tools, you were talking about changing the narrative, but I'm wondering, can we have more tools? What could we develop as tools to fight back against some of this control? It's like every one of these companies that you have your email where they say, oh, we guard your privacy, we give you all the control, but they make it so difficult you can't.
So what kind of tools?
Yeah, what?
You're asking what kind of tools we have?
Yeah, what kind of tools do you think could you imagine we could use to take more control so we're not, slave to this? Like I turn the Java off when I'm surfing the web so I don't have to be triggered by images. What can you imagine fighting back somehow?
Oh, you want to? Okay, some Kevin and then Stefan. Kevin.
Yeah, I think this is the critical question that I think that it's important to intervene at the stage of which technologies get developed, and at present the only technologies that get developed are the ones that VC companies figure are the ones that they can make money the quickest with. And so I'm influenced by Ivan Illich's framework of tools for conviviality. These are tools which are designed to allow us to live better together with each other. And I think the best example here has to do with transportation, where at present there's a lot of backlash against the ubiquity of cars in our culture, that in fact, for many people, you cannot meaningfully choose not to use a car, and that we should instead prioritize tools which allow people to enhance their capacities without foreclosing the possibilities that other people have. This would mean the bicycle instead of the car, because in order to get around in our society, you have to have a car. And I think that like the QR code as the way to interact with a menu is not convivial. You don't have the option not to use it, whereas a simple printed menu is something that people can opt into using.
Thank you, Stefan.
Yeah, no, I think I would second that point that, how you construct the technology, it's like, I mean, there's still a range of modes of using it, but if if you have if the engineers are, part of the conversation rather than just optimizing revenue, I do think that would be a big difference, right? Mm-hmm. So, and I do think then, and with AI, I mean, what does AI for? AI writes mediocre text. There's like, I mean, so maybe you can replace labor and it lowers costs, but computer generated text is not that great actually. Mm. So it's you could think of other uses of that computing power that would be much more innovative, but it's not used that way. So.
Tega?
Yeah, I think there's so many amazing tools and ways these technologies could be used. Like, if we look at the work of artists and designers, there's so many clues there, right? One project I didn't have time to talk about today was, I created also with Sam a smell-based dating service where we used digital technologies but had people wear T-shirts and send them to each other and then choose matches based on how they smell, right? So trying to combine like the analog, the material with the digital in different ways. Other stuff I work on is like solar-powered computing. So what if your computers go off when they run out of energy and the sun goes down, right? That's a way to author a different relationship as well. I think the issue is, it's very well to do all these experiments and open up these little suggestions of how we might build a different world, but I think we have to look at the incentives and the context in which the engineers or the designers are working in. And when engagement and metrics and, it's this late stage capitalism that we're in, then I think that's what is constraining the development in this very, problematic direction that we're going.
Well, what I think that you all share, you have very different viewpoints and positions, but you all share a very strong critical sense. You don't take things for granted and face value, and you all have a very clear viewpoint. And I think that that's the best that we can do as curators, as academics, as influencers, is to stimulate people to have their own counter-narratives and antidotes and antibodies. So I want to thank you for an amazing conversation tonight. I want to thank you all for coming, and also people in the overflow rooms, our dear ones. And now, and I want to thank, as usual, Christina for being such a great partner. And now you know that we have soggy snacks and so-so wine for you outside, and we can continue the conversation. So thank you very much. Thank you.